I am totally convinced that the Democratic Party has become the largest impetus for people joining the Republican Party. This just in, Donald Trump indicted by the Manhattan grand jury on more than 30 counts related to business fraud. So basically, President Donald Trump is facing misdemeanor charges for some business dealings he had prior to entering office. These dealings have to do with the settlement reached between his company and a whore named Stormy Daniels. Article reads, Donald Trump faces more than 30 counts related to business fraud and an indictment from a Manhattan grand jury, according to two sources familiar with the case. The first time in American history that a current or former president has faced criminal charges. Now, it's not lost on me that the alleged crimes were committed before President Donald Trump entered office and therefore would not be covered by presidential immunity. However, the fact that this Democratic DA is pushing this prosecution against Trump, despite having turned the other cheek for so many other former presidents who have committed war crimes and outright treason against the American people, is not going to be lost on the American public as a whole and is almost guaranteed to assure President Donald Trump re-election in 2024. To take a quick look at some of the other former presidents who I believe should be first up in line for prosecution, check this out.
Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway. 75.
While every president since Eisenhower could conceivably be indicted and charged for war crimes, we don't have to go that far to see the hypocrisy coming from the Democrats and some establishment Republicans. For example, exhibit number one would be George Bush. How is it that he has not been prosecuted for lying to the American people and getting us entered into the illegal occupation of Iraq? This is an illegal war. So was the war in Afghanistan. But if we focus on Iraq, a country where there were no weapons of mass destruction ever found, despite lies being told by George Bush, despite the fact that George Bush illegally wiretapped American citizens, spying on us and depriving us of our right to privacy, no prosecution was ever committed against him. Listen to what Obama says on this topic.
The most popular question on your own website is related to this. On change.gov, it comes from Bob Furtick of New York City, and he asks, will you appoint a special prosecutor, ideally Patrick Fitzgerald, to independently investigate the gravest crimes of the Bush administration, including torture and warrantless wiretapping?
We're still evaluating how we are going to approach the whole issue of interrogations, detentions, and so forth. And obviously, we're going to be looking at past practices. And I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backward.
I don't believe anybody is above the law. But on the other hand, I think we should be looking forward and not looking back. Now, what kind of, if that's not the dumbest thing I've ever heard, what crime is not committed in the past? Every crime that anybody in jail has committed is in the past. So how can you say on one hand, I don't think anyone's above the law, but then your reasoning for not prosecuting the crime that George Bush committed is it happened in the past? While we're on the subject of Obama, let's not forget that he himself is a war criminal as well. Do you know that this man has droned American citizens? This article is coming from the ACLU. The headlines read, ACLU and CCR lawsuit, American boy killed by U.S. drone strike. Actually, there were 3 U.S. citizens killed. The ACLU and CCR have filed a lawsuit challenging the government's targeted killing of 3 U.S. citizens in drone strikes far from any armed conflict. In Al-Awlaki versus Panetta, the groups charged that the U.S. government's killings of U.S. citizen Anwar al-Awlaki, Samir Khan, and 16-year-old Abduman al-Awlaki in Yemen last year violated the constitutional guarantee against the deprivation of life without due process of law. Now, this is undisputable. The killings were part of a broader program of targeted killings by the United States outside the context of armed conflict and based on vague legal standards, a closed executive process and evidence never presented to courts. Now, riddle me this. When did the United States government gain the right to kill U.S. citizens without a court proceeding, without a trial? Now, I know we see cops killing U.S. citizens with impunity in America, but at least they argue they were fearful of their life. But when did the government get the ability to drone someone without any court proceedings, without them being served any type of chance to surrender? When did the U.S. government get this power? Answer, it never did. These are war crimes, let alone the fact that Barack Obama took the 2 wars that he started with and promised that he would end, those being in Iraq and Afghanistan. He took those 2 wars and ballooned them to 7, instigating wars in Libya, Syria, Somalia, Sudan. Obama was never held responsible for his crimes. But yet, our main focus is Trump settling a case with him dating some hooker. Oh, but don't forget, even if we look past these war criminals and say, oh, well, they're covered with presidential immunity, let's not forget that the Democratic Party is responsible for the end of democracy itself. In 2016, the Democratic Party stole the election, rigged the election in favor of Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. The DNC has successfully argued in court that the Democratic Party has no responsibility to honor the wishes of its voters. This article is coming from The Observer. The headline reads, Court concedes DNC had the right to rig primaries against Bernie Sanders. They're literally not even trying to hide it anymore. The picture you see is of former Democratic National Committee Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who had to resign in disgrace after this scandal came to light. The article reads, in June of 2016, a class action lawsuit was filed against the DNC and the former chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for violating the DNC charter by rigging the Democratic presidential primaries for Hillary Clinton against Bernie Sanders. Even former Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid admitted in July of 2016, I knew, everybody knew, that this was not a fair deal. He added that Debbie Wasserman Schultz should have resigned much sooner than she did. The lawsuit was filed to push the DNC to admit their wrongdoing and provide Bernie Sanders supporters who supported him financially to the tune of millions of dollars in campaign contributions for being cheated. Jared Beck, one of the leading attorneys representing the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, told The Observer, the standard governing the motion to dismiss requires the court to accept all well-pled allegations as true for purposes of deciding the motion. Thus, the court recited the allegations of the complaint that it was required to accept as true. and in so doing, acknowledged that the allegations were well pled. Indeed, if you look at it, the complaint, you will see that all of these allegations accepted by the court specifically are relied upon public knowledge.
Learning today that a new book that is coming out by Donna Brazile, the former acting chair of the Democratic National Committee, that the campaign of Secretary Hillary Clinton was far more influential at the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, than we previously knew. Do you think, though, that what we're learning from Donna Brazile's book suggests that the campaign, that what the Democratic National Committee did, meant this election was rigged?
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a pretty powerful charge.
Well, what we have to focus on now as Democrats is we recognize the process was rigged, and now it is up to Democrats to build a new process, a process that really works and works for everyone, and that as we go forward, we have confidence in the integrity of the system, that Democrats, as they run a primary, are going to let the people speak, and that we're going to have a candidate who's the candidate chosen by the people. That's our job.
Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Donald Trump. I think that he's the mascot for many open, card-carrying racists, suspected white supremacists, neo-Nazis, alt-right members, Ku Klux Klan members. However, everyone who supports Donald Trump is not necessarily racist. Everyone who supports Donald Trump is not necessarily alt-right. Many of Donald Trump's supporters are looking for a populist option outside of the standard Democrats or Republicans. People are looking for an outsider because we understand that especially the Democratic Party has sold the United States out to the highest bidder. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Harry Reid openly acknowledge the fact that the DNC, the Democratic Party, has rigged their primaries against Bernie Sanders. So when things like January 6th happen, Stop the Steal, how can you blame average normal Americans for thinking that it's possible the Democratic Party has stolen an election when they have a history of doing so and openly admitting it? It's not so far-fetched that the elections in 2020 were stolen. That's not a far-fetched idea. Although if you listen to the mainstream media, they make it sound as though only crazy racists would believe that this is possible. Like I said, I'm not the biggest Trump supporter, but it's not hard for me to believe that the election was stolen from him in 2020. And even if it wasn't, now that we see what leadership of Joe Biden has brought us, who would prefer Joe Biden? When you see him instigating World War III, him picking wars with Russia and China, him instigating Ukraine to not push for peace, but instead push for war. Who would think that Donald Trump is the worst of these two options when President Biden barely has his own cognizant ability to speak complete sentences? It's not so far-fetched to believe that Trump might be the lesser of two evils. Not only that, when we see the Democratic Party pushing to criminalize him, you're pushing people who otherwise would not support Donald Trump to do nothing but support Donald Trump. But hey, that's just what I think. Tell me if you agree. Leave it in the comments section. If you've made it to this far in the video, I support you. I appreciate your attention. Be sure to hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to smash the subscribe button for more content like this. Peace. So you made it all the way to the end of the video, but you haven't hit the like button yet. Come on now. You're cheating me, you're cheating yourself. Go ahead, hit the like button. And while you're at it, you might as well smash the subscribe button so you can get notifications every time I drop a video. I make a video every day, a different topic, a different subject. They're all interesting, so you can check them all out by hitting the subscribe button and setting your notifications to all so you get an alert when I drop a video. There you go.